In this video, I'll be showing you how to paint this simple snowman. Let's get stuck straight into this video, and I hope you have lots of fun painting him. I'm going to be working in my Actua sketchbook, so this is a 100% cotton sketchbook, and I'm in love with it. So I'll link this down below for you. And what I love about this is it's got 52 pages, but you can paint on both sides. And I started off by taping down my paper, so it gives me a lovely border, but it also helps to keep my page nice and flat as well. The supplies I'll be using today are, of course, my sketchbook. I'll be using my masking tape, which is by Unibond. I'll leave any links down below for you to have a look at. So if you're interested in purchasing these materials, all you need to do is click on the link. I'll be using my mechanical pencil for sketching the snowman. I've got my brushes, so I've got my favourite brushes, which are by Silver Black Velvet, and these are pointed round brushes. I've got a size 10, I've got a size 6, and I'll also be using a larger brush, which is my pointed oval wash brush, and I'll be using this for the background. I got some cloths for dabbing off my watercolour brushes. I've got my favourite mixing palette, which is a ceramic palette, and I got this from Jackson's Art Supplies. Jackson's Art is a supply store in the UK. I've also got 3 jars of clean water, so I know there's 2 here. I got one for rinsing my brush off, one for an extra rinse of my brush, and also another jar of clean water for applying clean water to the paper. We'll start off by sketching the snowman using simple shapes. I'm going to start off by floating him in the air a little bit. So I'm going to start off by here because we are going to draw some snow around him. I'm going to start off with quite a longish body. And we'll make this rounded because we are going to sort of flatten it off with a scarf a bit later on. But for now I'll make it a bit more rounded, and this doesn't have to be completely rounded or completely symmetrical either, because of course snowman isn't symmetrical. And I'm going to make him a bit wavy on the bottom just to make it look like snow. Now I'm going to draw in his scarf. So we're going to be drawing in his scarf. Can make it a bit flat there. He's going to have a big knot here, some big curvy knot in his scarf. And then we're going to be popping in the end of his scarf. So making it a bit wavy and then sort of waving it at the end. And then I'll make this end shorter. So I'm just bringing it out, curving it again. We'll do the little frills with the watercolour paint, so I'm not putting the frills of the scarf in yet. Then coming from this knot, I'm not going to draw that line from the very top there. So let me just zoom in and you'll know what I mean. So I'm not drawing this line from the top, I'm leaving a little gap so it looks a bit more natural. And then I'm going to curve that scarf. And then I'm going to start drawing in his head. So of course there's going to be a circle placed on top of the body. So to make it a bit easier, I'm going to go from the top of the body and draw through the scarf, and we will of course erase these lines at the end. But I'm going to get in a little circular head, like that. And then we're going to draw in a hat. In the reference photo, the snowman does have a top hat, but I preferred to have a little woolly hat. So all I did is have a look on Pinterest at some snowmen, and I'm not copying this completely, so it's not copyright, but I did decide to put a little woolly hat on him. So I'm going to pop in a little woolly hat, and with the woolly hat, it will sort of start about down here, so it doesn't just sit on top of his head, it does come around his head a bit. So I'm going to just draw in a bit of a wavy line to show that it is woolly and it's a bit more, and it's a bit uneven. So that's the top of it, and I'll also make this look quite uneven, so it makes it look like it's the material sitting on top of his head. Then we're going to go with a bit of a floppy woolly hat, so I'm just going to draw a bit of a cone shape on top of his head, which is a bit uneven, and then I'm going to pop in a bobble, so we're going to make that bobble lovely and fluffy and big. I'm going to draw in his eyes, and I'm going to draw in a carrot for his nose, so the carrot will come between his eyes, so poke up like that, and then we're going to give him a smiley mouth like this. But of course, if you wanted to pop in some little coal for a mouth, then that is completely up to you. I'll now put in some buttons, and with the snowman it looks like he's kind of facing a little bit in this direction, so I'm going to put the buttons a little bit to the side like that. So now with his stick hands, I'm just going to get in a light guide with his hands just to show you, but I will paint these in afterwards. I'm going to have two. Actually, I'll tell you what, we'll give him a little three twigged hand there, and then this hand is underneath the scarf, so we're going to pop it in about there. I'm going to make it look really uneven with two sticks on that one. And then the snow is really easy. All you need to do is start up the snowman's body a little bit so he looks like he's stuck in the snow, and you just sort of wave your pencil like that so it looks a bit like a wave. You can make it look very curved. I'm going to keep these colours pay on now, so I'm going to start off with my nice watery mix of the grey. I'm going to just paint that down the one side. I'm just painting it down the left hand side of his body and underneath his scarf as well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a damp brush, and this is my size 10 brush, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to swipe that brush down the edge of that paint that I've put down, and what will happen is that will just bring out the paint, soften the edge, and then that paint will start flowing into the water that I've put down onto the page with my damp brush. So it'll bring that colour across. You're right, Sky. We'll also just blend out this edge here as well. We'll do the same thing to this side of his body as well, so just a bit on the edge here. So underneath the scarf. So this is the edge of the snowman's body. I mean, just using my damp brush now to blend out that edge. I'm also going to paint it down the side of his scarf. I'm going to be careful how I add this water now, because I don't want to paint over the shadows, because of course if we paint into these shadows then this is going to cause back runs. But I'm just going to add a little bit of water to the middle of his body and also his face as well. I'm going to add in a very diluted wash of the phthalo blue. So you can see I'm leaving lots of white of the paper showing, but I'm also adding quite a lot of colour as well. So I'm going to add a little bit of the blue to his face as well, but leaving lots of white of the paper showing through. I'm also going to add some shadow to his face, so I'm just going to paint that around the edge. Some of that colour is now going to bleed out into the wet area, but that's what I want anyway. So I'm just going to paint that into more of a rounded shape. And then just underneath his hat as well. If you find that the paint is spreading a little bit too much, rinse off your brush and dab it onto a paper towel, and then take off some of the paint that's spreading too far. Because this will act as a sponge then and take off some of the excess moisture. So just spread that out using your dry brush. So I got my nice diluted wash of the permanent rose, and I'm just going to paint that all over the scarf. To get a very light wash of this and a light tone, I added lots of water to this paint. And then while that's still wet, I'm going to take some thicker paint and I'm going to just drop it into a few areas. So I want nice soft edges. I'm just going to add a bit of shape and a bit of shadow to this scarf. So I'm going to drop it on the bottom of the scarf and also around the side of the knot, also underneath the knot. And then let's go with the left hand side where it's going to be a bit darker. Also add some more to this side as well. I'm just letting it bleed across into the wet areas. I'm going to also paint the hat, so I'm going to paint a nice diluted wash of the permanent rose. I'm going to leave a little bit of a highlight, so I'm going to leave some of the white of the paper showing through just on the top of the hat. So I'm going to leave that area unpainted, and it's quite a regular shape. I'll leave a little bit of the white of the paper showing at the top of the hat as well to add a highlight to the top of the hat too. And then we'll pop in a nice dark permanent rose for the bobble hat. Make it look a bit fuzzy on the ends. And then taking my darker pink, I'm just going to drop in a few shadows again. So concentrating those shadows on the left hand side. A bit on the left hand side at the top of his hat here, or at the bottom of his hat should I say. And then also on this area here as well. So just on the left hand side. And then also at the bottom here as well. If you find that parts of your paint is drying, you can just use a damp brush and blend that colour across. Just coax it across with a damp brush. Do make sure that it's only damp though, because if you add too much water to the paint, then that's going to flood the paint and it's going to push the paint out and cause back runs. So we're going to allow this to dry completely now. If you want, you can use your heat gun or your hairdryer. I'm going to paint a shadow on the buttons as well. So let's pop a little shadow in the buttons to make them look a bit more 3D. So I'm just painting on kind of a curved C shape or an upside down an upside down C shape. I'm also going to darken the shadows underneath the scarf. So this is the grey that we got from mixing the blue and the burnt sienna together. And then just using my damp brush then to blend it out a bit. So this is just a damp brush so that this colour doesn't spread too far. But then it gives us a soft edge. I'm also going to add a bit of that shadow underneath here as well. So really darkening up that area. I'm also going to add a darker value to the bottom here so it makes it look like he's sitting in the snow. And then I'll just use my damp brush to blend that out. I'm going to paint in the background now, so I've just got my oval pointed wash brush and I'm going to paint in the background with the clean water. I'm avoiding the snow and I'm of course avoiding the edge of the snowman as well. So I'm just painting around the snowman really carefully. I'm actually going to just paint up to here, so I'm not touching the snowman. I'm going to leave that paint paper dry. And I'm just going to paint here. And then taking some French ultramarine, and this is lovely and pigmented. So it's a nice dark value. I'm going to start painting that on. So once you paint a dark colour next to a lighter colour, it really makes that lighter colour pop. So it's going to make the whites of the snowman and the pink as well really stand out. It's going to create a lot of contrast. I'm going to leave the edge of the pom-pom white just to create a bit of a highlight. So I'm just painting around that there. And then taking my phthalo blue, I'm also going to paint that on. So I'm just going to let those two colours mix together. I think I'll actually take that grey that we used in the background and just paint it onto the edge. So it's a bit darker on the edge and it just gives the background a lot of strength. Also going to paint that grey down the bottom as well. And this grey's got lots of water mixed into it, so it's not really dark. I'm going to use the grey at the bottom now as well, just to add quite a bit of shadow at the bottom of that colour. Just pulling it up a little bit just to make it look not so uniform in the bottom. That might look like trees in the background. So this is my phthalo blue again. Painting it really carefully next to the snowman. I'm actually going to leave a bit of a highlight next to the snowman, just to make that edge look really light and stand out a bit more. So I'm just painting carefully around his face, leaving a bit of a white highlighted edge. This is my French ultramarine now. I'm going to paint that carefully over the bottom of the snow. Bit of the phthalo again. Pop in a bit of the French ultramarine just to make it look a bit darker. So I'm just going to add a bit more pigment, so a bit more paint to this edge here, just to really bring out the dark colour. And then taking the grey, I'm going to pop that into the edge just like we did with the left hand or the right hand side. And then taking my grey, I'm just going to paint that onto the bottom. So this is nice and thick. I'm just pulling up some of that paint just to create some sort of texture in the background. Might actually bring it up to the edge as well. Now what you can do to add lots of texture in the background is rinse your brush off and have a nice clean brush, and then use the water droplets and drop them into the paint as the paint starts drying. And I'm going to drop it close to the snowman's face just to sort of bring focus to the snowman. And what that does is that helps to cause little backruns, and that will bring lots of texture within the painting then. If you want those droplets to be bigger, add more water to your brush. I'm going to paint a little bit of the blue right at the bottom, so this is very diluted. You want to keep this blue colour very light in tone because of course we're painting a white object. This is, in this case, it's the snow. And then I'm going to add some of the grey, and this is very diluted again, but I'm going to put the grey right at the front because in the foreground is closest to us because it's going to be the darkest area. So this is going to stand out the most. So I am adding quite a bit of the Payne's grey here in a more concentrated version. So I'm just using a few little sweeping motions with my brush, and you can see I'm using some dry brush technique as well, and then using a little bit of the diluted grey at the front just to create a bit of a shadow around the snowman, but I'm not going too wild. And then I'm going to use my damp brush to blend that out. Now I've got some of the quinacridone rose, and it's a little bit more concentrated, so that means it's got a little bit more of the paint in this and less water, so it's noticeably darker. And I'm just going to start painting on these little curved lines. I'm curving the lines because I want that scarf to make it to look like it's a chunky scarf and it's more curved and rounded. So I'm just using the tip of my brush. This is my size 6 brush, I think this was. I've got some Payne's grey on my brush now, and I'm going to add that around the knot to create a shadow within the scarf. I wanted to separate areas of the scarf and just make those areas look like they're separate from each other. So that's why I popped in the Payne's grey, and this is quite concentrated and being painted onto the dry paper. Some of the red is still a little bit wet, but it was pretty dry when I popped it down. Now I'm going to start painting a shadow around the curve of the hat as well. So I'm just curving that shadow around with the quinacridone red, slightly more concentrated again. And then I'm going to take a damp brush and just blend that out because I wanted the edges to be nice and soft. Then I'm going to take the tip of my brush and I'm just painting on these tiny little lines, and that's going to look like the hat is woolen, and it's just going to give some texture to the hat. So I'm just adding a few little lines here and there, and then I'm going to add some of the Payne's grey, very watered down, and I'm going to add some of the lines with the Payne's grey as well, and that's just going to create a bit of dimension. It's going to create some shadows within the hat. I'm also going to add a few shadows with the tip of my brush in the bobble as well. And now with the orange, so I got this orange from mixing my quinacridone red with Hansa yellow, and I'm just going to pop that on, and then just using a bit of Payne's grey at the bottom while that carrot nose is still wet. I'm going to also paint a smile, so I'm just using the tip of my brush. This is quite a small brush, this one, and then I'm just going to paint in the little coal eyes as well, and this is very concentrated Payne's grey that I'm using. If you don't have Payne's grey, you could always use another dark colour like a black or an indigo or very dark blue, something dark that you've got. I've added lots of water to my phthalo blue now, so this is quite vibrant but also not really opaque. It's still quite transparent, and I'm going to paint the buttons, leaving a little highlight, so that's going to make the buttons look more rounded with the little highlight. And I really loved the effect of leaving parts of the paper white to add that light colour. Now I've just added my ultramarine blue into some brown, so this was burnt umber, and that's going to make a really dark brown that I can use for the sticks. You could always use a dark colour that you've got, maybe a Payne's grey mixed in with your brown to make it really dark, or you could make up a brown with the primary colours that you've got, or you could use a sepia or a Van Dyke brown. It's completely up to you. I'm just painting on these stick arms with my the thin part of my brush, and then I'm going to use a damp brush around the bottom, and that's going to blend the edge out and make it look soft, so it looks like the stick is stuck in the snowman's body then. Now I'm going to take some ultramarine blue and I'm going to start flicking it over the edge of my finger to create these little splatters. And the reason why I'm not just tapping the back of my brush is because I want these splatters to be quite small. I also want them to be in a certain area, so I find that by using my finger I get more direction and more control. Now I'm going to use some gouache, and this is the Winsor Newton Professional Gouache. I love this gouache. I've literally had this tube for about 2 years, and I've used it. I love it. It lasts such a long time. And I'm going to start flicking on some snow splatters in the background, just using the same technique as we did for the snow. Brushing the edge of my large size 10 brush over the edge of my finger, and then I'm also brushing that the snow over the snowman as well, just to make him look like he's in his surroundings. I'm going to use the tip of my brush with the gouache now, and I'm just blobbing on some little blobs to give some bigger snowflakes in the sky. You could also use the rounded end of your paintbrush and dip it in your gouache and then use that, and you get more of a rounded look then. And I used to always use that effect when I used to be painting wooden plaques. So I'm going to take the gouache on top of the sticks as well to make it look like there's snow landing on his arms. And I love this gouache because it's lovely and concentrated and really thick and very opaque. Thanks so much for watching today. Did you enjoy that video? I definitely had so much fun painting this snowman. I don't know what it is about snowman, it just makes me feel so Christmassy. I think back in the day when I was little, I just always remembered it snowing around about Christmas time and making snowmen as a kid. And also when my boys were little, they're nearly 18 and they're 13 now, but when they were little it snowed quite a lot round about Christmas time, so we made so many snowmen together, so it just brings back the most amazing memories. I also love how simple this is to paint as well, so you don't have to really spend too much time thinking about it. Have a lovely rest of your day, have so much fun painting the snowman, and I'll see you soon. Bye.